Hey guys, Joe and Ribs here coming at you with another daily Spireside chat. Today I want to talk about True Grit, a 1 energy common which gains you 7 block and exhausts a random card in your hand. Just get it out of the way right at the start. I think this is a top 3 Ironclad common. I think it's a very good card. I don't always want a billion of them in every deck, but I'm often quite happy to have 1 or 2. I also think that True Grit is a very high priority upgrade. When upgraded, it only goes from 7 to 9 block, which is only a +2, and like +3 block on a card is a pretty bad upgrade. So +2 is not good at all. But instead of randomly choosing which card you're exhausting from your hand, you get to choose and specify which card you're exhausting from your hand. And that is quite valuable, in my opinion. So I want to try to explain why. First off, let's just get this out of the way really quick. And I've talked about this more in other videos. If you want to hear all about exhaust cards, check out my daily discussion on Feel No Pain, and you'll hear all about them there. But basically, a third of Ironclad's card pool has exhaust written on it in some way. There are several cards in Ironclad's card pool which interact with this exhausting to do good things for you. Feel No Pain makes you block. Dark Embrace draws you cards. There are relics which interact with it to make things, make good things happen when you exhaust cards. Exhume exists to get exhausted cards back if needed. Ironclad just has lots of ways to make exhausting cards very strong, and over the course of a run, whether you're trying to pick up lots of them or not, you're very likely to pick up 1 or 2, and so this exhaust a random card in your hand on True Grit is going to almost certainly end up being a positive effect in your deck by the end of a run. Even without that, though, and this is why I want to talk about True Grit in particular, even without the fact that exhausting a card has immediately beneficial things going on, where like it might make you extra block, or it might remove a burn from your hand, which is good, or it might remove a curse from your hand that was having some negative effect on you if the curse remained in your hand. That's all cool. That's all whatever. A really cool thing about True Grit, though, is that it lets you exhaust other cards, and there aren't that many Ironclad cards that do that. Off the top of my head right now, Burning Pact lets you exhaust another card. Fiendfire sort of lets you exhaust another card. There are some that do things very messily, like Fiendfire exhausts your entire hand. So yeah, it can exhaust other cards, but it's exhausting all of them. Like, you'd better not want those ones. And the same can be said for like Second Wind exhausts all the non-attack cards in your hand, or Sever Soul exhausts all the non-attack cards in your hand. Corruption makes it so that your skills exhaust when played. So there are other ways in Ironclad for sure to exhaust cards other than the card you're looking at itself. But True Grit is one of the, I think, only 2. I think Burning Pact's the only other one which lets you exhaust a specific card in your hand that you choose. And that's quite valuable. Getting the bad cards out of your deck is obviously good. You go to stores and the shopkeeper charges you 75 gold plus 25 for every time you've done it so far this run to be able to take a bad card out of your deck. And that does do it permanently, whereas True Grit only does this for a fight. But, like, yeah, taking a strike out of your deck, if you don't want to strike, means that the next time through your deck, you don't have to draw that strike. So if the strike had, like, almost no value, it's sort of like drawing a card, a little bit, you could imagine. And then the next time through your deck, you draw another card, because you don't have to draw the strike. And all of a sudden, you have this cascading card draw effect, where instead of drawing worthless cards, you're drawing valuable cards. So one way you can think about this is like a Shrug It Off almost that's delayed. So Shrug It Off gains you 8 blocks and draws a card immediately. True Grit gains you 7 or 9 block, and it will sort of draw you an extra card the next time through your deck, because instead of that card you didn't want, you get a better card. And maybe the card that you exhaust, like, you wouldn't have minded that much if you drew it, so it's only like drawing half a card or something. But the amount of extra real estate that you can cover through your deck by exhausting the parts of it that you don't want is immense. You can just get through your deck over and over and over again much more rapidly. This is relevant for hallway fights, even if you're in a hallway fight where you're up against an enemy who like attacks you for 24 every like 2 out of 3 turns, and you just need to block enough until you get to a point where demon form scales up and you can kill him or something. Then exhausting your strikes will matter in that fight. It will probably save you a little bit of health, but it's most relevant by far against act bosses. Ironclad's pretty good at hallway fights. There are lots of cards in Ironclad which just do quite a bit of damage on turn 1, 2, or 3. Something like Wild Strike, for example, it just deals a lot of damage turn 1, 2, or 3. And Ironclad also has a relic which sustains for 6 health at the end of every fight, so it's okay if you take a bit of damage in a fight. But that relic is not helping you very much in a boss fight, where you have to kill something with 300 plus health over the course of many turns, and if it kills you, you're dead. Your relic doesn't like go off halfway through the fight. Oh, I noticed you've been fighting for a while. I might need some health. Nope. You have to actually complete the fight. And Wild Strike, dealing 17 damage to that guy, if your deck's really, really godly strong, maybe you can get there doing that. But a lot of the time, and like conceptually how Slay the Spire is balanced, the bosses are pretty tough to kill just with like commons which deal damage. You just sort of don't get enough damage before they, attack you for 60 or something, and then you're dead. So what True Grit does in a fight like that is it takes a deck which has a lot of cards and conceptually maybe some relics that make it very good at 1, 2, and 3, turns 1, 2, and 3, and it lets you exhaust specific cards out of that deck and prune the deck into a deck that is good on turns 5, 6, 7, 8. If you have 1 or 2 True Grits, maybe a Burning Pact, you can quite rapidly turn a deck of 25 to 30 cards into a deck of 10 cards. And those 10 cards can be cards that you really need to actually win the fight. So Ironclad has some sort of boring ways to immediately win boss fights. Demon form, the strength can just pile up so quickly that you kill the boss before it can kill you. And Limit Break, I think, is somewhat the same way. Even if you're not trying very hard, Limit Break can just make you a ton of strength because it doubles your strength every time you play it. So you like get 3 strength from something, Limit Break, headbutt the Limit Break, play it again, you have 12 strength all of a sudden, and like the other guy's dead. That's already enough for most of the fights in the game. You can maybe talk about Barricade too. Barricade, if you can make a lot of block, this will trivialize fights for you. So there are these are boring ways that rares can win fights by just doing something that's unfair for Ironclad. And if you have those, that's great. But in a lot of runs, which you'd like to be able to win, you don't get one of these rare cards. They're rare for, they're called that because you don't see them often. That's coming at you with these Slay the Spire tips. So being able to build strategies which beat bosses out of uncommons can be really cool. And a lot of the uncommons that Ironclad can beat bosses with actually quite specifically benefit from exhausting cards in ways where it's not written on the card. It's not Feel No Pain, where it's if you exhaust a card you gain 3 block and you're oh, so exhausting cards is good. It's more subtle than that. It's something like Rampage. Deal 8 damage every time this card is played, increases damage by 4 for this combat. So the more times you can play Rampage, the more damage it deals. And that means that if you draw it more often, you play it more often and deal more damage with it. And so the scaling sort of card draw effect that True Grit creates by exhausting bad cards out of your deck so you don't have to draw them again, so you draw something else instead, means that you draw Rampage much more often and get to play it more often. If you think about I'm in some fight where I know that Rampage is how I'm going to kill the enemy, and I'm not going to kill the enemy with strikes or whatever. So every strike that I draw has 0 draw value. I don't care about it at all. And then my defends are sure, that's worth drawing 1 card or whatever. I'll draw a Shrug It Off for 1 card, that's fine. And then drawing Rampage is also worth drawing a card. If you get all the strikes out of the deck, the card draws that are actually valuable go from being half of your draws to being all of your draws. And all of a sudden you're effectively drawing 2 cards a turn. 2 times as many cards a turn, which is very good. So Rampage is one uncommon that works that way. Dropkick is another uncommon that works that way. Dropkick, you can get your deck down to a point where you can actually go infinite with Dropkick plus another card. So Dropkick plus a Flash of Steel, a 0-cost card that will draw Dropkick again. You Dropkick the enemy who is vulnerable, that draws you a card. You draw a Flash of Steel or something. You Flash of Steel the enemy, that draws you a card, and you draw the Dropkick. And then you Dropkick the enemy, draw the Flash of Steel the enemy, draw the Dropkick. You have to get all of the cards in your deck into your hand for that to work, because you have to only have one card in your discard pile to be drawing as you're cycling through. And so True Grit exhausting a bunch of cards in your deck is very valuable for this to work. Even if you're not going fully infinite with Dropkick, like having 2 Dropkicks or Dropkick plus a Flash of Steel, just having Dropkick plus Shrug It Off is typically going to be enough. You just play Shrug It Off 4 times a turn and Dropkick 4 times a turn, and that'll get you there eventually. Another uncommon that works this way, sort of, and this one's a little bit more difficult to make work, but Dual Wield sort of can work this way. If you can exhaust your deck down to a small enough pile of cards with a Dual Wield in it and something like a single copy of Metallicize, you're able to make so many Metallicizes by duplicating them with Dual Wield, which can copy attacks or powers, that you can actually outblock a lot of the bosses in the game. And by doing that, you can enable yourself to just, like, win with, I don't know, just, like, kill them with a Twin Strike or something. I don't know. If your deck really sucks at dealing damage, it might take a long time to kill them by doing that, but you can kill them by doing that. So that's 3 different ways that uncommons can, like, kill enemies for Ironclad if you exhaust the deck down toward them. I think another one that I'll mention that's also quite awkward but can work is Searing Blow. Searing Blow can be upgraded any number of times, and the more times you upgrade it, the more damage it deals. So in some boss fights, you just sort of have to spend all of your energy blocking. But if you're able to exhaust your deck down to a situation where some of the energy you're spending blocking every turn is by playing Armaments, which upgrades all the cards in your hand for the rest of combat, and you're drawing Searing Blow in that hand every time, then your Searing Blow is going to rapidly scale up in damage and be able to kill an enemy. So that's actually 4 different uncommons in Ironclad, which can be used to build a strategy where Ironclad scales out of control and wins a boss fight if you're able to exhaust the other cards around them out of the deck so that you can draw them a lot. They're cards that are very hungry to be drawn. They have to be drawn. And that's why having a True Grit is so valuable. It's also quite valuable to upgrade True Grit. Now, True Grit is an okay card in hallway fights without the upgrade, because a lot of the time you're playing the important cards anyway in hallway fights, and then you play True Grit and exhaust a random card in your hand, and the remaining cards in your hand are not that important. So, like, it's fine. And in hallway fights, the fact that you're exhausting cards isn't as relevant as in boss fights. But in boss fights, for a lot of these strategies that I've just talked about, you don't want to play the card that your strategy is revolving around until very late in the fight. You don't want to play Dual Wield until you're able to draw it at the same time as Metallicize. You don't want to play your Metallicize until you're able to duplicate it with Dual Wield. So both of those cards have to be in your hand, not getting played, in order for this to work. Dropkick you can play, but you may not care that much about vulnerabling the enemy until you're actually ready to kill the enemy. Because vulnerabling the enemy likely means playing Bash on the enemy, right? So that's like 2 energy for a little bit of damage. That's expensive. Like, you could be blocking instead. Once you have infinite dropkick damage, it doesn't matter that you dealt 10 damage to the enemy on turn 3, because you're able to deal infinite damage on turn 9 or whatever. And that's more than 3, slightly. So you don't really want to be playing Dropkick every time that you draw it. So Dropkick, not really. Dual Wield, not really. Metallicize, not really. Rampage, you're generally happy to play. You can get away without playing it sometimes, but Rampage is one where Rampage plus unupgraded True Grit works pretty well. Searing Blow, you never want to play. You do not want to play this card until you've upgraded it to like 150 damage, at which point you win. So, was there one more that I missed? Anyway, the point is that these strategies actually rely on you being able to exhaust cards around the vital components of your like scaling strategy for late in the fight. It's actually really important that you're exhausting a specific card. And so this upgrade can be very, very, very valuable if that's what you want to do with True Grit. And yeah, I like True Grit a lot. This is something that I think about for Act 1 fights, even. Sometimes I try to build toward this concept to win an Act 1 fight, although it works better in Act 2 fights typically because of who the Act 2 fight guys are. And I'd say that, like, probably a quarter plus of my Act 2 boss kills as Ironclad come from doing something like this. I have a deck which can beat hallway fights and has a ton of cards in it which are strong, and then I have one focus strategy that can beat boss fights, and I have the ability to prune my deck toward it for turn 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, where that strategy starts to shine through and wins for me. So, True Grit is a very, very, very key common conceptually for doing that, and highly recommend trying out using it in this way if you haven't done so already. I have a Ironclad run where I did something very much like what I've been describing with Rampage, which I'm gonna throw onto YouTube, so I'll link that below the video and you can check it out if you want to see this actually applied and put into practice. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let me know what you thought. I have links to Discord and Twitch channel and stuff below, and I'll be back tomorrow for another daily Spire side chat. It might be about the third character, because the third character is meant to be coming out on the beta branch today. Fingers crossed. Really excited. I hope to be back tomorrow with some really exciting stuff. Alright, bye-bye guys.